Frontier Station Omega sat at the very edge of where humans lived in space. It looked like a huge metal bug stuck to an asteroid field, pulling out valuable minerals while trying to ignore that alien raiders kept attacking more and more often. Jake Sullivan had worked there for 3 years fixing armor. His job meant he'd gotten really good at making human equipment work even after alien weapons hit it, weapons that weren't supposed to exist according to the government's reports. The loud alarm woke him up at 3:47 in the morning. The special sound pattern meant a ship was coming, unknown type, probably dangerous, but maybe just lost. Jake grabbed his tool bag and ran to the docking area. He thought it would be another broken human ship that needed fixing after a fight. Instead, he found an alien warrior ship that looked like someone had used it for shooting practice. It belonged to the Kitharans, and something with a serious anger problem had attacked it. The ship's living metal hull had huge burn marks from energy weapons. Its smooth, curved shape was now bent and twisted in ways that made Jake feel bad for whoever had to fix this mess. "There's someone alive inside," said Commander Walsh. He was the station's top officer, a man who was good at fighting but also really good at making simple things way too complicated. "It's a female Kitharan warrior. She's badly hurt. The ship's air system is failing, and we can't open the door." Jake looked at the damaged ship through the window. He watched the way its glowing systems kept flickering on and off, like something dying. "Sir, Kitharan ships don't have normal doors. They grow their ships instead of building them. We need to connect with the living systems to get in. Can you do it?" "Maybe. But if someone's alive in there, forcing our way in might kill her." Commander Walsh's face showed he was thinking about whether a living prisoner was worth more than a dead enemy. "Do what you can, Sullivan. We need to know about their recent attacks." 20 minutes later, Jake had convinced the dying ship to open what looked sort of like a door, though it seemed more like a living thing than a machine. The inside of the ship was nothing like human ships. The walls curved like bones, the controls glowed with living light, and the air smelled like lightning mixed with growing plants. The warrior was lying near what looked like the control area. Her armor had melted together with the ship's systems in ways that showed she'd been trying to keep both herself and her ship alive through pure willpower. When Jake first saw her face, he noticed she looked almost human, except for the pointed ears that showed she was definitely alien. She was also beautiful in a way that made him forget he was supposed to be professional. Her living armor had saved her life, but it had also caused problems. The living metal was made to connect with the person wearing it, creating a perfect link between warrior and machine. But the energy weapons had damaged those connections. Now she was stuck in broken armor that was slowly poisoning her while also keeping her alive. "Easy," Jake said softly when her eyes opened. They changed color with her feelings. Right now they were a shade that probably meant she wanted to kill anyone who came close. "I'm here to help. Your armor is damaged and it's poisoning your body. I need to check the damage before we can move you." She spoke quickly in her own language. Her voice sounded like music, and his translator had trouble understanding. She was both threatening him and asking for help, though her pride wouldn't let her actually ask directly. "I understand you don't trust me," Jake said, moving slowly toward her with his tools. "Your people and mine haven't been friends. But right now your armor is killing you, and I'm the only person on this station who might be able to fix it." Her ears went flat against her head. Jake wasn't sure if that meant she was scared or angry. Maybe both. But she stopped fighting when he started checking her armor. Maybe she understood that struggling would only make things worse. The test results were bad. The armor's connections to her nerves had been partly cut by the weapon damage. This was creating feedback that was slowly destroying her nervous system. Even worse, the armor was trying to fix itself by using materials her body thought were poison. "Your name?" Jake asked gently, trying to start some kind of conversation. "What should I call you?" "Commander Lixa," she answered in accented English. Her voice sounded like someone who wasn't used to being weak. "3rd Battle Group, Kitharin Defense Corps." "Commander Lixa, I'm Jake Sullivan, armor technician. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing before I do it. I'll stop if you tell me to. The damage to your armor is bad, but we can fix it. The biggest problem is that the nerve connections are creating poisonous feedback. I need to separate the damaged parts before we can fix them." She watched him get his tools ready with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust enemies, no matter what they said. "Human methods are simple and rough," she said carefully. "Kitharin armor needs understanding of living systems, not just machines." "Then teach me," Jake answered, surprising both of them with how direct he was. "Show me what I need to know to help you." For the next 2 hours, Jake worked very carefully to separate the damaged armor pieces from Commander Lixa's hurt body. The living metal responded to feelings as much as technical skill. If he approached it without caring, the living material fought against him. But when he showed real concern for both the armor and the person wearing it, the repairs became possible. Commander Lixa helped him through the process even though she didn't want to. She explained how the armor formed a partnership with its wearer. She warned him when his methods might cause more damage. Her early anger slowly changed to something like professional respect as Jake showed he was treating her injuries with the same care he'd give any hurt person, no matter what species they were or which side they fought for. The big moment came when Jake successfully removed an important chest piece that had been slowly leaking poison into her blood. The armor came off cleanly, taking the poisonous stuff with it. Commander Lixa felt better right away. Her color-changing eyes moved from angry red to something more like grateful gold. You actually fixed it," she said, surprise clear in her voice. "You expected me to hurt you. I expected human cruelty. Torture to get information. Your people don't have a good reputation for treating prisoners well." Jake carefully put the removed armor piece in a special container. He noticed how the living metal kept pulsing with weak life signs even when separated from her. "My job is fixing broken things, Commander. That includes people when the things keeping them alive need repair." "Even enemy people?" "Especially enemy people. Anyone can be nice to their friends." Commander Lixa looked at him with new interest. Her ears moved from their flat defensive position to something more curious. "Your way of fixing armor is unusual. Among my people, only bonded partners or family members do such work. It requires trust, closeness, understanding of the wearer's deepest weak points." Jake felt his face get hot as he understood what she meant. "I'm just trying to keep you alive, Commander. The cultural stuff is above my pay grade. And yet you work with the gentleness of someone who understands that armor feels what its wearer feels. That hurting it hurts me." "Does it? Does it hurt you when I work on it?" "It should. But your touch is." She stopped, looking for the right words in a language that wasn't hers. "Careful. Respectful. Like you're trying not to hurt something you care about." Jake looked down at his hands, suddenly aware that he'd been handling her armor with the same gentle care he might give to a hurt animal. "I guess I don't see the point in causing pain that doesn't need to happen. Good repair work means understanding what you're working on, not fighting with it." Commander Lixa was quiet for a long time, her eyes moving through colors Jake was starting to think meant deep thought. Finally, she spoke like someone making an important choice. My armor will need lots of repairs before it can keep me alive without help from machines. The work will take days, maybe weeks. I understand. And it will need. Another pause, longer this time. It will need the same gentleness you showed today. Living armor forms bonds with those who repair it. If you continue this work, there will be results you can't change. What kind of results? The kind that can't be undone once they start, Commander Lixa said softly. Among my people, letting someone repair your armor creates connections that go beyond species, politics, or war. Jake looked at the hurt alien warrior lying weak on his work table. Her life depended on his technical skills, and her trust depended on his character. Outside the damaged ship, Frontier Station Omega kept its lonely watch around an asteroid field where humans and Kitharans killed each other over resources and land arguments. But inside this small space, surrounded by the soft hum of life support machines and the gentle glow of healing armor, the war seemed like something happening to other people in a different universe. Then I guess we better make sure I do this right, Jake said finally, and began preparing for the longest repair job of his career. Part 2, Learning to Trust. Jake's second time working with Commander Lixa's armor taught him that Kitharan technology had both a sense of humor and a mean streak that would make a broken computer jealous. The living metal seemed determined to shock him whenever he stopped caring emotionally, forcing him to keep real concern for both the armor and its wearer or risk getting knocked out. Your armor has opinions, Jake said after the third time a shoulder piece had given him what felt like a small lightning strike. Living armor can sense what the repair person is thinking, Commander Lixa explained. Jake thought he heard amusement in her voice. If it senses you don't care or you're angry, it protects itself and its wearer. And if it senses, what? Love. Being compatible. Trust. The emotional states that allow deep repair work. Her ears twitched in what Jake was learning meant she was trying not to laugh. Among my people, armor technicians are chosen for their ability to feel emotions as much as their technical skills. Jake carefully touched a damaged nerve connection with tools made for machines, but somehow they worked on living technology. So your armor is basically forcing me to care about you to fix it? That's too simple, but not completely wrong. That's either the most controlling technology I've ever seen or the smartest. Both, Commander Lixa said with what was definitely amusement now. Kytherian engineering believes in systems that help create good relationships, not just functional connections. Over the next few days, Jake learned to work with armor that responded to his emotions like a moody pet. The living metal would purr happily under his hands when he approached repairs with real concern, but would become stubborn and difficult if he tried to rush without paying attention to Commander Lixa's comfort. This forced closeness slowly broke down the walls between enemy fighters. Commander Lixa began sharing pieces of her culture, how Kitharan society saw armor wearers as both warriors and artists, how armor was grown instead of made, and how the partnership between wearer and technology created bonds that lasted forever. Your armor is beautiful, Jake said during one particularly careful repair, working to fix nerve pathways that glowed with light patterns unique to Commander Lixa's genes. It's like wearing living jewelry that also stops energy blasts. Each suit is grown specifically for the person who will wear it, she explained. Her eyes changed to colors that Jake was starting to think meant pride mixed with sadness. The armor learns from its partner, changing to match their fighting style, emotional patterns, and physical needs. Over time, warrior and armor become two parts of the same system. What happens if the armor is damaged too badly to fix? The warrior usually dies with it. Armor can't be given to someone else. The nerve bonding is too specific, too deep. Commander Lixa watched Jake work with looks that seemed to remember his every movement. Which is why your ability to repair damaged armor has never happened before. Jake stopped working, suddenly understanding what this meant. You're saying no human has ever successfully fixed Kithrin armor before? I'm saying that no one who isn't Kithrin has ever successfully connected with armor technology. The nerve patterns needed for deep system access are supposed to only work for our species. But I can access your armor systems. You can do more than access them. You can talk to them, change their behavior, guide their self-repair functions. Commander Lixa's voice had wonder mixed with what might be worry. According to everything my people know about armor technology, what you're doing should be impossible. This discovery led to Jake running more tests on both himself and the armor. He discovered that his brain patterns showed unusual compatibility with Kithrin nerve frequencies. This was either an amazing coincidence or proof that human and Kithrin brains had more in common than either species had known. Maybe the war started because we're more alike than anyone wanted to admit, Jake suggested during one of their longer talks. Maybe we've been fighting ourselves all along. Commander Lixa was quiet for several minutes, her colors changing through patterns Jake had learned meant deep emotional processing. My people believe that humans can't make real empathic connections. That your species sees relationships as trades, giving only to get something back, caring only when it helps you. And what do you believe now? I believe that the human who has spent 18 days treating my injuries with the gentleness of a bonded partner might be proof that my people need to change what they believe. The personal nature of armor repair had created a closeness between them that went beyond the formal boundaries of enemy prisoner and reluctant caretaker. Jake found himself looking forward to their sessions not just as professional challenges, but as chances to spend time with someone whose intelligence and strength impressed him more each day. Commander Lixa had started trusting him with stories about her life before the war, her role helping evacuations, her lost family, and her growing doubts about a war that seemed to exist only to keep itself going. Tell me about the convoy, Jake said gently as he worked on a particularly complex part of her armor's power system. The mission where you got hurt. Commander Lixa's eyes darkened to shades Jake had learned meant painful memories. Civilian evacuation from Kepler Station Beta. Families with children, old people, scientists who had no military value. We were supposed to take them to safety when human forces attacked the convoy. Our forces attacked civilians? Officially, you were attacking a military supply convoy. The intelligence was wrong. Jake felt something cold in his stomach. How many? 83 people. 26 children. Her voice carried the kind of pain that came from failing to protect people who depended on you. My squadron managed to evacuate 38 before the attack beat us. I'm sorry, Jake said, the words feeling too small for what she'd been through. For what my people did. For the losses you couldn't stop. You weren't responsible for the attack, Jake Sullivan. Maybe not directly. But I wear the same uniform as the people who were. Commander Lixa looked at him with eyes that had changed to colors Jake didn't recognize. Something between gratitude and surprise. Among my people, accepting responsibility for others' actions is considered very honorable. It shows you understand your connection to your community goes beyond personal benefit. Or it shows that I understand my community sometimes does terrible things that need to be acknowledged. That too. Their growing emotional connection showed in small gestures that crossed species barriers. Commander Lixa began knowing Jake's movements during repair work, shifting position to give him better access to damaged areas and offering insights about armor behavior that made his work easier. Jake started bringing her food that Kithrins could eat and made sure she was comfortable during the long sessions that could last for hours. "Your hands," Commander Lixa said during one particularly quiet moment as Jake worked on the complex nerve connections around her spine. "They're different from what I expected." "Different how?" "Gentle. Careful. Like you're afraid of hurting me." "I am afraid of hurting you." "That's kind of the point of being careful." "But I'm your enemy." "Your people's enemy." Jake stopped working, suddenly aware of how his hands had been moving over her armor with the kind of tender care usually saved for lovers or family. "You're not my enemy, Lixa. You're someone who needs help, and I'm someone who knows how to help. Everything else is just politics." Using her name without her rank hung in the air between them, marking a change in their relationship that neither had said out loud until now. "Jake," she said softly, testing his name with the same careful attention she'd shown when learning to trust his touch. "When you repair my armor, can you feel what I feel?" "Sometimes. When the nerve connections are active, there's feedback. Emotional echoes, I guess. Then you know that what I feel for you is not just gratitude for professional services." Jake's hands stopped on her armor, his heart beating faster as he understood what she meant. "Lixa. I know the complications. The impossibility of the situation. But I also know that living armor responds to truth, and it has been responding to your touch as if you were." She stopped, looking for words that could connect different languages and cultures. "As if you were someone I had chosen to trust with my life. Haven't I been? Haven't you?" "Yes," Commander Lixa said simply. "And that choice has results neither of us expected." Outside the repair room, Frontier Station Omega continued its careful watch over the contested asteroid field, while intelligence reports showed increasing Kithrin raid activity that suggested big offensive operations coming. But inside the small space where human hands worked to heal alien technology, the war felt like someone else's problem, and the growing connection between former enemies seemed like the only thing in the universe that really mattered. Jake went back to his work with hands that shook slightly from more than just the careful precision needed for armor repair, while Commander Lixa watched him with eyes that had settled on colors he was starting to recognize as something very much like love. Jake found the encrypted data core during what should have been simple maintenance on Commander Lixa's main nerve connection. The armor's deeper systems had been protecting something hidden in its quantum storage. Military intelligence so sensitive that accessing it would need breaking every security rule the Kithrin Defense Corps had ever made. "Don't," Commander Lixa said quietly when she realized what he'd found. Her eyes had changed to the dark, resigned colors Jake had learned meant someone preparing for death. "That information is classified beyond your clearance level. Beyond mine. Accessing it would be considered an act of war by both our governments." "What kind of information needs that level of security?" "The kind that could end this war forever, or make it so bad that no one could ever stop it." Jake studied the data core through his diagnostic screen, noticing the complex encryption patterns that seemed to change and evolve as he watched them. "Lixa, your armor's been protecting this data by sacrificing its own repair functions. Whatever's in here, it's been slowly killing you to keep it safe." "I know. And you were willing to die rather than let anyone access it?" "I was willing to die rather than let the wrong people access it." She met his eyes with an intensity that made his breath catch. "But you're not the wrong people, Jake Sullivan. You're someone who has spent 26 days proving that enemies can choose to heal each other instead of causing harm." The moral weight of the decision pressed down on Jake like a physical force. Commander Walsh had been pressuring him to get any available intelligence from the captured armor. Meanwhile, Lixa herself seemed ready to sacrifice her life to protect information that might be crucial to both their species' futures. "Tell me what's in the data core," Jake said finally. "Help me understand what we're dealing with." Communications records. Battle reports. Evidence of war crimes done by extremist groups in both human and Kithran forces. Commander Lixa's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying terrible knowledge for too long. Proof that this war has been kept going by people on both sides who make money from continued fighting, while most of our people want nothing more than peace. Evidence that could end the war? Evidence that could prove the war was started and maintained through lies. But also evidence that could be used to justify completely destroying either species, depending on who controls how it's interpreted. Jake felt the crushing responsibility of holding information that could reshape the galaxy or destroy it completely. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to access the data core and send its contents to both human and Kithran command at the same time, making sure that neither side can hide or change the evidence." Commander Lixa's colors had changed to something like hope mixed with terror. "But accessing the core needs breaking through nerve safeguards that will probably kill me." "Then we find another way." "There is no other way. The encryption is tied to my vital signs, my nerve patterns, my genetic signature. Getting it out safely would need technology that doesn't exist yet." Commander Lixa looked at him with an expression Jake couldn't quite understand yet. "But maybe. Give me 48 hours. Let me study the problem, check the station's technical databases, maybe find a solution that doesn't need you to die for peace." Over the next 2 days, Jake threw himself into researching armor nerve integration with the desperation of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle before time ran out. The station's databases had frustratingly little information about Kithran technology, but Jake's direct experience with Commander Lixa's armor gave him insights that pure theory couldn't provide. The breakthrough came when he realized that the data core security wasn't made to prevent access. It was made to ensure that access happened only under specific emotional and psychological conditions. The encryption responded to the wearer's nerve state, needing not just technical skill but also the kind of deep trust and emotional connection that Jake had been developing with Commander Lixa over weeks of close repair work. "Your armor trusts me," Jake said during their next session, his hands working carefully around the data core's access ports. "The same way you've learned to trust me. The security system isn't just protecting the data from enemies. It's making sure that only someone with real care for the wearer can access it." "That actually makes sense," Commander Lixa said, wonder clear in her voice. Living armor security would naturally evolve to tell the difference between hostile extraction and consensual sharing. Which means we might be able to access the data without killing you. But it's going to need me to connect directly with your armor's nerve systems while you're awake and cooperating. The feedback will be intense. You'll experience not just my emotions, but my memories, my thoughts, everything the armor has recorded during our time together. Jake met her eyes steadily. "Will you experience mine?" "Yes. Complete nerve connection sharing. You'll know everything I think and feel about you, and I'll know everything you think and feel about me." "That's terrifying. And wonderful at the same time," Commander Lixa said softly. "There will be no secrets between us after this. No masks, no diplomatic courtesy, no careful boundaries between former enemies. If we do this, we'll know each other in ways that most bonded partners never achieve." "Are you saying you don't want to?" "I'm saying that I want to very much, and that terrifies me more than possibly dying." The nerve connection process took 3 hours and felt like stepping into someone else's mind while inviting them into his own. Jake experienced Commander Lix's memories as if they were his own, her childhood on a world of growing cities and living wonders, her training as a warrior protector, her growing horror as the war consumed everything she'd been raised to defend. But more than memories, he experienced her emotions, the loneliness of command, the guilt over those she hadn't been able to save, and the gradual understanding that the human working so carefully on her armor had become someone she trusted more completely than anyone in her own military. Through the nerve link, Commander Lixa experienced Jake's view of their time together, his early professional distance giving way to real concern, then admiration, then something deeper and more complicated than either of them had been willing to admit. She felt his determination to heal rather than harm, his growing protective instincts, and his quiet amazement at finding someone whose strength and intelligence challenged his assumptions about enemies and allies. The data core opened like a flower responding to sunlight, revealing its contents to two minds that had learned to trust each other completely. What they found confirmed Commander Lix's warnings, evidence of war crimes, false flag operations, and deliberate provocation by extremist groups who saw continued fighting as more profitable than peace. But they also found something neither had expected: communications between soldiers on both sides who had begun questioning the war's purpose, secret negotiations between moderate leaders looking for peaceful solutions, and overwhelming evidence that most humans and Kithrans wanted nothing more than an end to the killing. The data shows that peace is possible, Jake said as they gradually disconnected from the nerve connection. More than possible, it's what most people on both sides actually want. But it also shows how easily that desire can be manipulated by those who benefit from conflict. Commander Lix's colors had changed to patterns Jake had never seen before, hope and fear and determination swirling together in complex emotional combinations. We need to make sure this information reaches people who will use it to build peace rather than justify genocide. Their planning was interrupted by alarms announcing incoming ships, multiple vessels moving fast and broadcasting Kithran identification codes. Commander Lix's rescue force had finally tracked her to Frontier Station Omega, arriving at exactly the worst possible moment for delicate diplomatic negotiations. How do we explain this? Jake asked, pointing between them and the evidence of their nerve linking still glowing on his diagnostic displays. We tell them the truth, Commander Lixa said with the calm determination of someone who had made peace with impossible choices. That enemies can choose to become allies. That trust can bridge any gap between species. And that sometimes the most important victories are won not through conquest, but through understanding. Outside the repair room, human and Kithran military forces were taking positions for what could become the battle that finally escalated their Cold War into total destruction. But inside the small space where armor hummed with contentment and two former enemies prepared to trust each other with the fate of both their civilizations, Jake and Commander Lixa held information that could either end the war or make it impossible for anyone to survive. Whatever happens, Jake said, taking her hand as the station's defense systems powered up around them, I want you to know that these past weeks have been the most important of my life. Mine too, Commander Lixa replied. Her eyes settled on colors that Jake finally recognized as love mixed with absolute trust. And no matter what our governments decide about us, what we found together is real. Through the nerve link they'd shared, both of them knew that statement was true in ways that went beyond species, politics, or the small wars that occasionally interrupted the universe's larger story of connection and understanding. The first Kithran ship docked with Frontier Station Omega exactly 18 minutes later, and Jake realized that his careful repair work was about to be tested in ways he'd never expected. Commander Lixa's rescue force hadn't come to negotiate. They'd come expecting to recover their officer from human torture facilities, and the evidence of close cooperation between species was going to challenge every assumption both sides held about their conflict. They'll assume you've been torturing me to get information, Commander Lixa said as they prepared for what might be their final conversation as anything other than symbols in a diplomatic crisis. My people have been taught that humans can't feel real empathy, that any kindness you show is manipulation designed to get information. And my people have been taught that Kithrin see humans as inferior beings worthy only of conquest or elimination, Jake replied. So we're both about to disappoint a lot of expectations. The nerve connection data will prove what actually happened between us, but accessing those records will need technical cooperation between our species' most classified systems. Then maybe it's time for that kind of cooperation. Commander Lixa's smile was bright even in the harsh lighting of the repair room. Jake Sullivan, you have an amazing talent for making impossible solutions sound inevitable. It's a gift. Usually gets me in trouble. This time it might get us both court-martialed for treason. Worth it. The confrontation Jake had been dreading began the moment Kithrin boarding parties reached his repair room, accompanied by human security forces who'd apparently decided that cooperation was better than a firefight in the middle of a space station. What followed was less a military standoff and more a very tense cultural exchange program conducted at gunpoint. Kithrin Captain Thane entered the repair room with the smooth grace of someone expecting to find evidence of terrible things, only to discover his wounded officer sitting upright in fully functional armor while a human technician explained the finer points of nerve connection compatibility to anyone willing to listen. Commander Lixa, Captain Thane said in formal Kithrin that Jake's translator turned into something between relief and confusion. Report your status and describe your treatment by these humans. Captain Thane, Commander Lixa replied in standard English, apparently determined to make sure everyone present could understand her words. I'm alive because armor technician Sullivan chose to repair rather than interrogate, to heal rather than harm, and to risk his own career protecting classified information that could change the course of this war. The silence that followed this statement lasted about long enough for everyone present to realize that their assumptions about enemy behavior were about to be completely challenged. Explain, Captain Thane demanded. What followed was the strangest debriefing session in the history of relations between different species militaries. Commander Lixa, with Jake's technical support, showed the nerve connection compatibility that had made her armor repair possible, showed the assembled officers the encrypted data they'd recovered, and explained how weeks of careful cooperation had revealed the war's artificial nature. The proof couldn't be denied: armor recordings that documented every interaction between Jake and Commander Lixa, nerve connection logs that showed emotional progression from hostility through trust to something approaching love, and encrypted intelligence that revealed how extremist groups in both governments had been manipulating public opinion to maintain profitable conflict. This changes everything, Commander Walsh said finally, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone whose worldview had just been thoroughly destroyed. If this data is accurate, then we've been fighting a war that serves no one except arms dealers and political radicals. The data is accurate, Commander Lixa confirmed. But what it means goes beyond simply ending current fighting. Jake Sullivan's compatibility with Kithrin armor technology suggests that our species share nerve commonalities that could revolutionize cooperation between our civilizations. Captain Thane studied Jake with the expression of someone trying to figure out whether he was witnessing a miracle or a disaster. You're suggesting that this human could serve as a bridge between our technologies? I'm suggesting that this human has already served as a bridge between our hearts, Commander Lixa replied. And perhaps that's where all meaningful cooperation begins. The joint transmission of the encrypted intelligence to both human and Kithrin command happened at 1:47 p.m. Galactic Standard Time, and Jake was fairly certain he'd just participated in either the most important moment in relations between species or the opening act of a war that would consume half the galaxy. Both governments are going to hate us, he told Commander Lixa as they watched confirmation signals from military networks across human and Kithrin space. We've just handed them evidence that their entire conflict has been orchestrated by people who view soldiers as expendable resources in a profitable war machine. They needed to know, she replied, her armor humming with contentment despite the political chaos they'd just unleashed. And they needed to hear it from sources both sides trust. Do they trust us? They trust the armor recordings. Nerve connection data can't be faked or manipulated. It represents pure emotional and sensory experience. When both governments review what happened between us, they'll understand that real cooperation is possible. Jake hoped she was right, but 48 hours of joint debriefing sessions had taught him that military and political leaders had amazing creativity when it came to explaining away inconvenient evidence. The fact that human and Kithran officers were now working together to analyze the intelligence was encouraging, but Jake had learned not to underestimate bureaucracy's ability to complicate obvious solutions. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: junior officers and enlisted personnel from both species who'd been assigned to study the armor compatibility data. While their superiors debated political implications, the technical specialists were discovering practical applications that could revolutionize everything from medical treatment to space exploration. "Sir," Lieutenant Martinez reported to the assembled command staff, "the nerve compatibility between Technician Sullivan and Commander Lixa isn't unique, it's representative. Our preliminary testing suggests that about 12% of humans show some degree of armor connection potential." Captain Thane leaned forward with obvious interest. "And among my people, about 15% show compatibility with human technological nerve connections. The overlap suggests that our species' nervous systems evolved from common origins despite developing on different worlds." Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's xenobiologist, added her analysis with the enthusiasm of someone whose research had just been proven right in spectacular fashion. "The implications go beyond military applications. Living medical devices, enhanced environmental adaptation, space exploration capabilities, the potential for beneficial cooperation is extraordinary." Commander Walsh looked at Jake with an expression that suggested he was trying to reconcile the maintenance technician he'd known for 3 years with someone who'd apparently stumbled into reshaping politics between stars. "Sullivan, are you prepared to continue working with Commander Lixa on developing these applications?" "Sir, I'm prepared to work with Commander Lixa on anything she thinks would be helpful," Jake said. "Even if it means reassignment to joint research facilities, possibly permanent relocation to neutral space stations dedicated to human-Kithran cooperation." Jake looked at Commander Lixa, who was watching him with eyes that had settled on colors he'd learned meant hope mixed with barely contained affection. "Especially if it means that." The formal announcement came 6 weeks later, broadcast at the same time from Earth and the Kithran home world: the establishment of the first joint species cooperation initiative dedicated to developing technologies and relationships that served both civilizations' interests. Jake and Commander Lixa were designated as the program's primary technical liaison team, their nerve compatibility serving as the foundation for unprecedented collaboration between formerly hostile powers. The ceremony marking their new assignment took place aboard Harmony Station, a quickly constructed neutral facility positioned in the space between human and Kithran territories. Jake wore his dress uniform with living enhancements that allowed him to connect directly with Kithran systems, while Commander Lixa's armor had been upgraded with human technological components that created seamless integration between their respective capabilities. "You realize," Commander Lixa said as they prepared for their first official mission briefing, "that our governments are basically paying us to spend the rest of our careers working together on projects that need close nerve cooperation." "Strangest job assignment I've ever gotten," Jake agreed. "Also the best. There will be challenges. Political pressure from extremist groups who see cooperation as betrayal. Technical problems that need solutions neither species has developed alone. And constant watching from people who want to prove that partnerships between species are impossible. Sounds like Tuesday in my previous job, except with better company and more interesting technology." Commander Lixa laughed, the sound mixing with her armor's harmonious hum to create music that belonged to both their worlds and neither. Jake Sullivan, you have an amazing talent for making extraordinary circumstances seem perfectly reasonable. It's a survival skill. Especially useful when your job involves fixing things that were never designed to work together. Their first project involved developing living medical systems that could treat injuries suffered by either species, a practical use of their nerve compatibility that would benefit both military and civilian populations. Jake's understanding of human body systems combined with Commander Lix's knowledge of armor partnerships created hybrid technologies that went beyond what either species could do alone. But more than technical innovation, their partnership represented proof that former enemies could choose trust over suspicion, cooperation over conflict, and understanding over the comfortable certainties of mutual hate. The war crimes trials begin next month, Commander Lixa said one evening as they worked late in their shared laboratory, developing medical nanosystems that responded to both human and Kithran nerve patterns. Both governments are prosecuting the people who kept the conflict going for personal profit. How do you feel about that? Justice is necessary, but justice isn't the same as healing. She stopped working, looking at him with eyes that held depths Jake was still learning to navigate. Healing needs what we've found together, the willingness to see beyond the harm that's been done to the possibility of what might be built. And what might be built? A galaxy where the phrase former enemies becomes as outdated as the weapons we once used against each other. Jake reached across their shared workstation to take her hand, amazed at how armor that had once been designed to protect against his touch now welcomed contact that strengthened both their individual abilities and their collaborative potential. Commander Lixa of the Kithran Defense Corps, he said formally, would you like to spend the rest of your career helping me prove that the universe is more interesting when different kinds of people choose to work together? Armor Technician Jake Sullivan of the Human Colonial Forces, she replied with equal formality, I can think of no assignment that would make me happier. Their nerve connection activated automatically as their hands touched, sharing emotions and sensations that confirmed what both their hearts and their minds had already concluded, that sometimes the most important repairs were the ones that fixed trust rather than technology, and that the gentlest touch could be strong enough to heal the spaces between worlds. Outside their laboratory windows, ships from dozens of species moved through the neutral space around Harmony Station, carrying researchers, diplomats, and ordinary citizens who were beginning to believe that the universe might be large enough for everyone to find a place in it. The armor compatibility research was expanding to include other species, while the joint medical technologies were saving lives across the galaxy. But in the small laboratory where human hands and Kithran armor worked together to solve problems that had once seemed impossible, Jake and Commander Lixa continued the most important research of all, proving that love could cross any difference between people willing to choose each other over the fears that kept their peoples apart. You know, Jake said as they prepared to test their latest medical innovation, when I first started repairing your armor, I never imagined it would lead to this. What? Revolutionary technological breakthroughs that will reshape relations between species? That too. But I was thinking more about finding someone whose armor likes being touched gently, and who likes the person doing the touching. Commander Lix's smile was bright enough to power their entire laboratory. Jake Sullivan, you've mastered the art of finding the perfect thing to say at the perfect moment. It's easy when you're talking to someone whose armor broadcasts their emotional responses directly to your nervous system. So you're saying you only know how to please me because my technology tells you what I'm feeling? I'm saying that knowing what you feel makes it easier to figure out how to make you happy. But wanting to make you happy, that comes from somewhere armor can't reach. And where is that? Jake activated their shared nerve connection, letting his emotions flow through the link they'd built together over months of careful cooperation. Right there. Can you feel it? Yes, Commander Lixa whispered, her eyes bright with colors that meant joy mixed with absolute certainty. I can feel it perfectly. Their first kiss was witnessed by armor that hummed with approval, medical equipment that recorded optimal nerve synchronization, and the gentle lights of Harmony Station reflecting off the hull of ships carrying supplies to colonies where humans and Kithrans were learning to build cities together. It was, Jake thought, the most successful repair job of his career, fixing something that had never been broken, but had simply needed the right kind of gentle attention to remember how to work properly. Jake woke to the soft hum of living armor adjusting itself to the morning temperature changes aboard New Unity Station. Beside him, Lixa stirred, her armor's bioluminescent patterns shifting from sleep mode to gentle awareness. 10 years had passed since their first meeting in that damaged Kithran ship, and the galaxy had changed in ways neither of them could have imagined. Morning briefing in 2 hours, Lixa murmured, her voice still soft with sleep. The new compatibility candidates arrived today. Jake smiled, remembering his own confusion when he'd first discovered his ability to interface with Kithran technology. Now they ran a training program for the thousands of humans and Kithrans who showed similar nerve compatibility. What had once seemed impossible had become routine, different species working together, learning from each other, building something greater than either could achieve alone. "Remember when we thought we were unique?" Jake asked, his hand finding hers under the covers. Her armor responded to his touch with a gentle pulse of warmth. "We were unique," Lixa corrected. "We were the first to prove it was possible." Everything else followed from that. The war had officially ended 8 years ago, though Jake suspected it had really ended the moment 2 former enemies chose to trust each other in a small repair bay on the edge of human space. The extremists who'd perpetuated the conflict were serving long sentences, while the majority of both species had embraced cooperation with an enthusiasm that suggested they'd been waiting for permission to stop hating each other. Their daughter's cry interrupted Jake's thoughts. 3-year-old Arya had inherited her mother's pointed ears and her father's stubborn determination. She was also the first human-Kithran hybrid, living proof that the 2 species were more compatible than anyone had dreamed. Her existence had caused quite a stir initially, but now she was just another kid at the station's integrated daycare, playing with children from a dozen different species. "Your turn," Lixa said with a smile, nudging him gently. Jake got up, padding to the nursery where Arya was sitting up in her bed, her hair sticking up at odd angles. She'd been experimenting with her mother's training armor yesterday, and traces of bioluminescent gel still clung to her fingers. "Daddy, the armor talked to me in my dreams," she announced seriously. "What did it say?" Jake asked, lifting her into his arms. "It said I'm going to be the best fixer ever. Better than you and Mama combined." Jake laughed, carrying her to the kitchen area. Through their apartment's windows, he could see the latest joint construction project, a massive station that would serve as a permanent symbol of human-Kithran cooperation. Ships from both species worked side by side, their crews sharing tools, knowledge, and occasionally, Jake had heard, more personal connections. "Daddy, why did humans and Kithrans fight before?" Arya asked as he prepared her breakfast. Jake thought about how to explain war to someone who'd only known peace. Sometimes people are afraid of things that are different. That fear can make them do things that don't make sense. But you and Mama are different. Yes, we are. And you love each other. Very much. Arya considered this with the seriousness only a 3-year-old could manage. Then maybe the people who fought were just scared of love. Jake paused, struck by the simple wisdom of his daughter's words. "You know what? I think you might be right." Lixa joined them for breakfast, her armor fully activated for the day's work. They'd be training a new group of compatibility candidates, teaching them not just the technical aspects of nerve connection, but the emotional openness required for true integration. It was challenging work, but seeing former enemies learn to trust each other never got old. The council wants us to consider expanding the program to include the Zealothy, Lixa said, reviewing the morning's messages. They've expressed interest in the medical applications. The Zealothy? Jake raised an eyebrow. They've been neutral in every conflict for the past 1,000 years. Exactly. They want to make sure they can work with everyone. Our program is proof that traditional enemies can become partners. Jake thought about the implications. What had started as emergency repair work on a dying warrior's armor had grown into something that might unite the entire galaxy. Not through conquest or politics, but through the simple recognition that different species could choose to help each other. We'll need more trainers, he said practically. And more space. The station's getting crowded. Already submitted the expansion request, Lixa replied with a smile. I know how you think, Jake Sullivan. After 10 years and a neural connection that goes deeper than most marriages, I should hope so. Their workday began like any other, but Jake never lost his sense of wonder at what they'd built together. The training facility was filled with humans and Kithrans working in pairs, learning to trust each other with their deepest vulnerabilities. Some partnerships would remain professional. Others, Jake knew from experience, would develop into something more. Look at them, Lixa said during a break, watching a young human technician carefully adjusting his Kithran partner's armor. They have no idea how impossible this would have seemed 10 years ago. Maybe that's better, Jake suggested. If they don't know it's impossible, they won't be limited by what we thought couldn't be done. Speaking of impossible things, Lixa said, her colors shifting to patterns Jake recognized as mischievous happiness, I have something to tell you. Oh. Aria's going to have a sibling. The medical scans confirmed it this morning. Jake felt his heart skip, then race with joy. Another hybrid child, another proof that love could bridge any gap between species. When? 7 months. The doctors say everything looks perfect. He pulled her close, careful not to disrupt her armor's calibration. Have I told you lately that you're amazing? Not since yesterday. Then I'm behind schedule. They stood together, watching their students work, seeing the future take shape in small acts of trust and cooperation. The galaxy was vast, full of different species with different ways of thinking, different technologies, different dreams. But Jake had learned that differences weren't barriers, they were opportunities to discover something new, something better than what either side could create alone. You know what Arya said this morning? Jake told Lixa about their daughter's insight about fear and love. Lixa's eyes shifted to the deep, warm colors he'd learned meant profound contentment. Out of the mouths of children. She's right, you know. We were all just scared of love. Not anymore. No, Lixa agreed, her hand finding his. Not anymore. The war memorial stood in the station's central plaza, honoring those who died in a conflict that should never have happened. But beside it stood something else, a statue of 2 figures, human and Kithran, working together to repair a piece of living armor. The inscription read simply, "Peace begins with a gentle touch." Jake passed it every day on his way to work, and every day he remembered that moment when he'd chosen to heal rather than harm, to trust rather than fear. It had been the most important choice of his life, leading to everything that followed: love, family, and a galaxy where former enemies had become the closest of allies. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility. There would be challenges, Jake knew. Not everyone was ready to let go of old hatreds. But every day, more people chose cooperation over conflict. Every day, more partnerships formed between species that had once considered each other enemies. And every day, Jake and Lixa continued their work, proving that the gentlest touch could be strong enough to change the universe. As they returned to their students, Jake caught Lixa's eye and smiled. She smiled back, her armor humming with contentment, and Jake thought about how a simple repair job had become the foundation for a new age of peace. Sometimes, he realized, the most important fixes were the ones that repaired relationships rather than technology. And sometimes, all it took was someone willing to be gentle with something that had been designed for war. The armor had taught him that. Lixa had taught him that. And now, together, they were teaching the galaxy. Jake thought as he watched another human Kithran pair achieve their first successful nerve connection, the best job he could have asked for. Fixing things that were broken, healing wounds between species, and proving every single day that love was stronger than fear. The war was over. The peace had begun. And in a small training facility on a station between the stars, the future was being built one gentle touch at a time. Speaking of impossible things, Lixa said, her colors shifting to patterns Jake recognized as mischievous happiness, I have something to tell you. Oh. Aria's going to have a sibling. The medical scans confirmed it this morning. Jake felt his heart skip, then race with joy. Another hybrid child, another proof that love could bridge any gap between species. When? 7 months. The doctors say everything looks perfect. He pulled her close, careful not to disrupt her armor's calibration. Have I told you lately that you're amazing? Not since yesterday. Then I'm behind schedule. They stood together, watching their students work, seeing the future take shape in small acts of trust and cooperation. The galaxy was vast, full of different species with different ways of thinking, different technologies, different dreams. But Jake had learned that differences weren't barriers, they were opportunities to discover something new, something better than what either side could create alone. You know what Arya said this morning? Jake told Lixa about their daughter's insight about fear and love. Lixa's eyes shifted to the deep, warm colors he'd learned meant profound contentment. Out of the mouths of children. She's right, you know. We were all just scared of love. Not anymore. No, Lixa agreed, her hand finding his. Not anymore. The war memorial stood in the station's central plaza, honoring those who died in a conflict that should never have happened. But beside it stood something else, a statue of 2 figures, human and Kithran, working together to repair a piece of living armor. The inscription read simply, "Peace begins with a gentle touch." Jake passed it every day on his way to work, and every day he remembered that moment when he'd chosen to heal rather than harm, to trust rather than fear. It had been the most important choice of his life, leading to everything that followed: love, family, and a galaxy where former enemies had become the closest of allies. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility. There would be challenges, Jake knew. Not everyone was ready to let go of old hatreds. But every day, more people chose cooperation over conflict. Every day, more partnerships formed between species that had once considered each other enemies. And every day, Jake and Lixa continued their work, proving that the gentlest touch could be strong enough to change the universe. As they returned to their students, Jake caught Lixa's eye and smiled. She smiled back, her armor humming with contentment, and Jake thought about how a simple repair job had become the foundation for a new age of peace. Sometimes, he realized, the most important fixes were the ones that repaired relationships rather than technology. And sometimes, all it took was someone willing to be gentle with something that had been designed for war. The armor had taught him that. Lixa had taught him that. And now, together, they were teaching the galaxy. Jake thought as he watched another human Kithran pair achieve their first successful nerve connection, the best job he could have asked for. Fixing things that were broken, healing wounds between species, and proving every single day that love was stronger than fear. The war was over. The peace had begun. And in a small training facility on a station between the stars, the future was being built one gentle touch at a time.